Welcome to Richer Soul, Matt Zemon. It's great to have you join us today.
It is good to be talking to a fellow Pennsylvanian.
And I am excited for our conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I love that question. I think it's a great place to start. I had an interesting childhood. So when I was first born, um, my parents had a successful advertising agency in Philadelphia, and we lived in kind of a pretty large townhouse down on like near 22nd and Chestnut, for those familiar. And and we had a pretty nice lifestyle. And then going into first grade, my parents got divorced, and my mom moved us out to the suburbs for a year, and we lived in a duplex. And I think the narrative inside the family is that we lived off of like $6,000 for the year. And and I think that experience taught me very early on that you can have money, you cannot have money, but if you have love in the house, it's going to be okay. And I really wasn't, or I'm not afraid of whatever the outcomes are in store for me. And I know I can produce revenue. My mom rebuilt her agency after that, and she produced revenue, and I feel like I have that skill set as well. So, yeah, I think that was probably the most formative childhood experience around money that I can think of.
Interesting. One of the questions we always kind of try to figure out, and we're going to talk about psychology today and so forth, but it comes back to resilience, and it comes back to grit. And it's almost like, how do you teach your kids that? Because if you protect them from every bad thing, then they don't have that. At least that's what I've kind of learned, or at least that's what I've noticed.
Oh, I think that's incredibly true. And I don't think as a culture, that we do a good job of explaining to our children that we are so far beyond making a living in our expectations. There's a lot of countries in the world where you can see people who are trying to make a living, put food in their plate, put a shelter over their head. So as you get older, child, and I have an 18 and 20-year-old, what is it that you get excited about? Where do you want to trade your energy and your time for this money that's coming in? And how are you going to look at these things? So how are you going to look at these as, can you look at part of money as a tie to a responsibility, to a job? And part of when you spend money and you incur things and debt, it takes energy to pay that off. And just be aware of that as you move forward in the world. And I don't think those lessons are taught young enough and strong enough for our kids. I think, I think we're just taught to be consumers.
I was going to say, are they taught it to adults?
No, I mean, there are people who are fortunate to run across people like you and come in and you say, hey, let's talk about this and let's come up with a plan. But no, I think we're immature as a culture when it comes to our ability to have candid discussions about money. What is enough? Why do you need it? How do you get it? And what are the trade-offs as you move down that path? And there are trade-offs. I certainly made many trade-offs over the years where I followed an accumulation path to the detriment. What I thought I was modeling my father's behavior. My job is to provide. So I provided private school, I provided a house, I provided cars, I provided food, I provided summer camps. And I was away from my family a lot. And if I was to ask my kids now, would you have rather me been around more and had less? There's no doubt in my mind they would say absolutely. And I didn't learn that till later in life. So now I can move forward with that knowledge and sharing a little bit with you, Rocky.
Do you think your kids internalized it enough that they will behave that way as they grow and they go out and earn?
I think we are all programmed at a young age from our parents. So we have this, regardless of what our parents say, it's what they do that we witness over and over and over, and we live and we experience it viscerally and emotionally and mentally. So I think there is a chance that that's what they saw and that's what they'll do. And my hope is that the work I'm doing with, in my case, with the psychedelic medicine, which has then led to a different spiritual practice, which has led to a mindfulness practice, I'm hoping to break that pattern in my family. That I'm hoping that I can see the scarcity paradigm that my parents both had. Both my parents lost their parents when they were young. I think that Rocky, you lost your mom when you were young.
I did, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's it's funny because you don't realize it then, and then you lock it up.
yeah, you put it in the drawer.
You put it in the drawer and you forget about it. And then you don't realize what you've done. As a matter of fact, it's funny. I got to find this quote because I just saw this quote this morning and I was like, oh my God, I've never heard that before. And it's just a phenomenal quote. Here it is. I save them now because I always lose them.
That's smart.
If you look at the people in your circle and don't get inspired to grow beyond yourself, you don't have a circle, you have a cage.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know who said it, but the point is, I think we have a habit of locking ourselves in a cage. And that was kind of one of the ahas for me.
I do. And I think as this relates to people who lose their parents young. So what do they experience? They experience the other parent having to provide a lot more, which typically means less time for them. They experience a sense of abandonment and tremendous loss at an early age. They experience a need for independence and achievement because they have less people caring for them. And that manifests later in life in all sorts of ways. So my father lost his father when he was 8 or 9. And then my mom lost both parents when she was an early teenager. And I would imagine that experience is one of the things that brought them together. But I also think there's a scarcity paradigm. They grew up poor, really poor, and getting more was important to them. Yeah. So I think the question you started with is, how does our behavior impact our children? And I think it has tremendous impact. And it's never too late to change the behavior. It's never too late to model something different and to have your awakening or whatever you want to call it and model something different. And then what your kids do and how they process it, that's up to them. We can only be responsible for ourselves throughout this process.
And that goes a lot deeper than what you just said.
What's coming up for you?
No, I think too often we try and control everyone else and everything else. But literally all you can control is yourself and how you show up. So you have to it's the serenity prayer. I remember that from when it's a kid. And yet it's so simple and yet so hard to just, hey, control what you can control, let go of the rest, and be smart enough to know the difference.
It's such beautiful, wise words, and it's timeless, and it's across religions, across traditions. That concept that again, I don't think we're taught. We're not taught early on that right now, as you are loved, you are enough, and you are worthy. Period. Full stop. End of sentence. Now, you've got a whole bunch of years in front of you. What are you going to do with that? And it doesn't matter, is kind of the joke. You can do whatever you want to do with this life that you have. But we forget this core principle and we get distracted. Oh, I need to go do this before I feel loved, or I need to go get a partner before I feel loved, or I need to go get this thing, this car, this house, this boat before I feel I have enough. And none of it's true. All the external validations just allow us as people then to create another goalpost and go for that. As fast as we hit one, we go after another. And if we don't spend the time to look at ourselves and say, okay, wait a minute, I'm good. I'm just good. And now what's going to happen?
That was our original tagline.
I'm just good.
No, it's you got rich, now what? Because it didn't give you all the stuff you wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got your money and here you are still wherever you were to begin with. You keep making a comment And it's a question that I find very few people can answer, even highly, highly successful people. How much is enough?
It's an incredible question. And I think the answer is wildly different from person to person. I know for me, it's not having a house that is paid for is a great feeling. Knowing that I have financial security to cover basic expenses is a beautiful feeling. I don't feel the need to leave a legacy or the desire, the responsibility. I don't want it. I don't have particularly expensive taste in other things, and I like where I live and I like my community. So I don't really feel the desire to spend tons of money going to see other. And I've gotten to do a bunch of that. So I think what I love about that question is how much is enough in terms of how much love are you able to feel? How much love are you able to give? How are you able to surround yourself? Let's go back to that circle. Can you surround yourself with people that feed your soul? Can you pick an occupation? Again, it doesn't matter if it's a dishwasher or a entrepreneur, an artist that just feeds your soul so that we have this one life. I think you probably experience this too, where people talk about what's the work-life balance. There is no such thing as work-life. There's just life. Sometimes you're making money, other times you're not. But how do you live the most joy-filled life that you can live? And that's where I think we need to spend more time as a culture. But we're so worried about there's got to be more. There's not enough for everybody. I need what's mine. I got to protect what's mine. Yeah, I think we need to spend more time on how do we live the life we have versus the life we're aspiring to.
We've outlawed the word balance. We
Did
have
you
harmony.
in your coaching practice?
Yeah, it's all about harmony. Because as you said, at different times in life, different things come to the forefront. Everything's still going on. You just got to play the song the way you want it played so that you enjoy the melody. And if you don't, change the tune. Right? You get
Rocky,
to choose.
You can. I love actually, you did a really beautiful thing with your children, where you talked about how they can put in a little bit of money and have it accrue over time, and then that can lead to a retirement where they have some security. Those are techniques that are super effective. And I think you talk about it really doesn't matter if that number's X or Y. It's more of that's a tactic that can lead to more stability, which can lead to more harmony in your life as you move forward. So I think that type of candid discussion with your child is beautiful and important. And I didn't see in anything that you wrote, and I want them to go be a doctor or a lawyer or a banker or a blank. They're going to go do what they're going to do, and it's going to be okay. And regardless of what they choose to do, we can use money to help us maintain our equilibrium.
And that's the way we taught them not to be. What we really did was teach them not to be consumers. You can go buy stuff. There's nothing wrong with it, but don't get stuck in that consumer mentality and just do it mindlessly. So be more intentional with it. So we've kind of talked about early childhood, and we're getting into all these other areas. How did you get from this early childhood into the world of psychedelics?
Rocky, it's such a weird thing for me to even have this discussion with somebody like you at this point. So up until about 5 years ago, I was just another entrepreneur. I built and sold companies, all sorts of really geeky companies, and that's how I knew I was unsatisfied. I knew I just kept moving the goalpost. Oh, when I get a building with my company's name, I'll be satisfied. When I have 100 employees, I'll be satisfied. When I have 500 employees, I'll be satisfied. It never satisfied me. I just went on to the next thing. So friends of mine said, hey, come do a guided magic mushroom journey. I didn't do drugs. I didn't even drink that much. I was like, no, I'm not going to go do drugs. No. And they're like, no, you definitely want to do this. You should read what Michael Pollan's writing. This is a great way to explore your inner side. Yeah, you're going to like this. So I did. And in that first experience, I reconnect. My mom died when I was 22. She was 49. I reconnected with her. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I could pull kind of a string from her to me to my children. I'm like, do not understand what I'm seeing. I felt incredibly safe and loved in this first journey. And then in an instant, I was like, wait a minute, I don't feel safe and loved. This feeling that I'm feeling now is not what I normally feel. Well, that's interesting. And I had kind of insight after insight after insight. And I left that experience saying, I need to know more about this. And I ended up going back to school to get a master's in psychology and neuroscience so I could understand the science. And I started traveling around experiencing psychedelics by different types of practitioners, MDs, PhDs, taitas, shaman, different types of psychedelics, to explore my consciousness. And at this point, I have a deep spiritual practice as it relates to these medicines. And I spend time working with medical professionals and how they can incorporate some of these ceremonial elements into their protocols. And I spend time with spiritual leaders on how they can incorporate medical best practices into their protocols. Because there needs to be a reconciliation between these two, and it's happening and it's beautiful. But that's my long-winded way of saying I fell into this by accident and then did a bunch of studying.
And it's funny because I think this is a much bigger movement that's happening for a long time. I'll call it the church, but religion and science parted ways, and you took the two apart, which I think created a whole nother problem. They're coming back together now, and it's actually science, I think, coming back to religious, or let's actually call it spirituality, because I don't think
there's
it's
some baggage that comes with religious. Sure.
Correct. And when I look at religion, I look at, well, whatever the original text, regardless of the religion, says one thing, but all you people are practicing something that's not in alignment with what your book says. But it is not even in the book. You made it up, or somebody made it up, and that's all programming right back to that. But science is coming back, kind of figuring out, wait a minute, there is this whole spiritual part of the universe, and now they're kind of, they pulled away and now they're coming back. So it's kind of neat to watch that.
It's
that
beautiful to watch. I mean, in the old days, there was just healer, and it was both medical and spiritual. We in Western society, we separated those roles. I get it. And it's fair to say that if you were to take psychedelics and just give it to the clergy, that they don't have the latest information on my mind and my body to keep me safe. Okay, understand that. And conversely, if we were to give psychedelics only to the medical profession, we can say the same thing about their understanding of spirituality, because this particular type of medicine plays in both realms. What is interesting is this reconciliation that's happening, is the collaborations happening between both sides. And I'm hoping for a future where an exemption process happens with the DEA, where more of these psychedelic churches can come out from being underground and everybody can practice in the open with the latest scientific and spiritual knowledge being shared across person. And there are plenty of people who want this medicine and want these experiences. There's no shortage of that. If anything, we have a shortage of practitioner who can deliver it.
Most of them are prevented. Correct. Legally. Mm-hmm. And many of them have not been taught. So they don't even have the expertise to understand. And it's so far out of their realm of what their original teaching was that yeah, it'll take a while, but it's moving fast. So we'll see what happens. This kind of begs the question, though, why do you think depression and anxiety are so high in the Western world?
I think we have a number of factors that are feeding into this. One of those factors is people are leaving churches and they're leaving community in huge numbers. And in our Western nuclear family society, where we're waking up, we're getting in our cars, we're going to work, we're coming home, we're watching a show and having dinner and going to bed. And we're not spending time in community. So we feel lonely. And that's understandable. Part of it is social media, and that we are looking at these other people's lives constantly, what's projected as it, and we're feeling less than. Part of it is there's this beautiful movement happening now, and you have teenagers who are, I think, the same age as my kids in that zone, mine are 18 and 20.
Mine are a little older now. I
Okay.
think my articles are old.
Are they old? Okay.
They're not old. They're out of college and launched.
Look at you. Good for you. All right. But we're watching this generation who is so empathetic and so pushing the boundaries over. We can be less judgmental, we can be more inclusive, and all that's beautiful. And there's a lot of, I need you to change the way you talk to me. I need you to change the way you address me, or I'm going to be deeply offended. I don't even want to listen to your words because your words can hurt me. I think that can be a bit dangerous. I think there's an opportunity with things like psychedelics to turn the lens inside and say the only one who has, again, you're only responsible for yourself. So rather than try to change the outside world, which is a losing game, change the inside world, change the way you hear the words, change the way you hear the way people address you, change the way you respond. And there's happiness under that formula. Changing the external world, it's never going to be enough.
It's not. By the way, so we always used to talk about this financially from what I saw generationally. Like, one generation starts off, they immigrate, they work hard. The next one gets a boost up, and then they spoil their kids because they don't want them to work. And then, then they're poor again. I came to realize the same thing happens to societies. As a matter of fact, the book that I just finished reading, it's Neil Howe, The Fourth Turning is here. And it literally, it talks about why today's kids behave the way they do. And it's like, think about it. You had that first generation that came out of the war, the Great Depression, and then there was great boom, and then their kids did really well, and then we started protecting our kids, and now we're back to this part where you move away and you move together, and we're at that part of moving away. The good news is the next part's moving back together. So I think there's a whole bunch of societal things, and this is worldwide, along with things that are happening in the world of science. All these things are going to converge together. And I think 10, 15 years from now, we're going to have a much better world to enjoy. We just got to live long enough to get there.
Well, Rocky, I think it's important to take a moment and just again, all reasonable metrics. This is the best time ever in the history of the world to be alive. Period. Violence is down. Famine is down. Age is up. There's so many good things happening. Thomas Paine in Agrarian Justice talks about it's hard to grow up in a world where everything of value is spoken for. So think about what this next generation is looking at. How are they going to afford the houses that you and I live in? What reasonable path do they have to get there and get married at the age that you and I got married? And what I'm seeing is a very positive reinvention of the game. And they're saying we're not going to do it. We're going to go live in vans. We're going to go live in tiny houses. We're not going to work 5 days a week because there's no point to it. But we'll do 4 days, and we'll work as a barista, or we'll work as a this, or we'll work as an artist, or we'll work as an Instagrammer, or we're gonna run D&D games, whatever. And we're gonna want less, and we're gonna spend less, because they don't want to compete. And I think that's actually beautiful. And I think it's especially beautiful as we see the rise of AI happening. And again, how many less satisfying jobs is that going to remove? It gives the kids a chance to go use your hands again. Be a potter, be a plumber, be an electrician, do something. Because again, there's enough. It's an abundant world that we're living in.
By the way, AI can't do plumbing.
Exactly. Yeah. Can't do any of these things with your hands yet.
No. So there's
it's a great
tremendous
time to do those things.
Opportunity. Mm-hmm. So we're here to talk about your book. What inspired you to write the book, Psychedelics for Everyone?
Yeah. When I came out of this, I found a bunch of information that was really technical. and I found a bunch of information that was really kind of opinionated. So I wanted to take all the questions that I was curious about, find people smarter than me to write about them, and put that into a book that was accessible for people without a scientific background. And then I thought it was important to go and get all the references and put that in the book so those who wanted to check references could. And then I added personal stories that were mine. I wrote a couple of the chapters on things that I was interested in exploring. But this is really my way of giving back to anybody interested in this topic, an easy way to explore the different medicines and what the research says about them, and then make whatever decision's right for them, whether they want to take a psychedelic, whether they understand more about why someone they love might want to take a psychedelic, or maybe it just changes the way they vote in the next election.
Out of curiosity, is the book reviewed by medical professionals?
I appreciate that, Rocky. Yeah, it was super important to me to have kind of a checks and balances on this book. So in addition to having experts write these different chapters, I went ahead and hired medical professionals to review every chapter for accuracy. And I put their name and their credentials on each chapter. So that again, people can trust this information. And it's not all positive. It's not all rainbows and sunshine. There are things in there where it's like, yeah, the research here is split, or this is negative, or this is something that might be a risk. While I say psychedelics are for everyone, I mean for society. They are by no means meant that everybody should take a psychedelic. Rocky, you've done some exploration in this space, haven't you?
I have.
What has been your experience with these medicines?
So I, like you, got involved in it accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
It actually started out of a spiritual conversation. And that kind of led me down to that. And I think one of the biggest things I learned was I didn't realize the cage I put myself in.
Mm.
So it opened that up and allowed me to see, oh, you've built up these invisible walls that you weren't even aware of. And a lot of it has to do with childhood, right? I'm highly successful and you just bury it all and you move on with life. And so there's that. And I think the second part of what I've found it useful for, and we can talk about some of the different things that are out there, is, and I've talked about this from a standpoint, I grew up kind of at the edge of the baby boomers going into the Xers. I was told this is the way the world worked as a kid. And all of a sudden, I was at the beginning of the whole world got a whole new set of rules. But even beyond that, we're all going back to where we started the conversation. And the reason I always ask that first question, we are all programmed as kids, and I know that. What I have found is some of these psychedelics, and there's one that's actually FDA approved for other things, ketamine.
Mm-hmm.
It has the power of neuroplasty, which is the power to essentially rewrite your programming and to also show you your underlying programming. And so it gives you that dual edge of, hey, why is it like this all the time? And what do I like? How did this come to be? And then let's rewrite it. And I had someone on the podcast maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and he went through a heroic dose, and I haven't done anything like that. But he was like, I think the comment was something like, it was like 30,000 years of therapy in 4 hours or something, like massive life-changing shifts. What also surprised me dramatically was the spiritual component of this. That is just so far outside of what I expected or even thought about. And the more and more I delve into it, the more I read. Your book was very helpful because I don't know a lot about a lot of these. And I was able to look across all of the different things and also to see the historicals and see how it's all kind of being tied together. As a matter of fact, one of the things that popped out in your book was this quote that more than 2/3 of identified atheists drop their atheist label afterwards. I'm like, that's incredible. And I realize also why or how they got this to become mainstream, which comes out to the other thing. The studies were used in PTSD. So this is soldiers who have traumatic things from all these wars. And literally 2/3 of them no longer had PTSD. The dramatic shift in what they are able to achieve and do that. So now all of a sudden, politicians can't go, no, I don't want the soldiers to feel better, right?
It's exactly.
Smartest angle of how to change behavior or get into a market. I think if the church figured out that the easiest way to convert atheists was to hand out drug and communion, they'd all be handing it out, right? And these are those little things in life. You go, holy crap. Like, oh, if we just did this, which is totally not what you expected, this is the result. And I used to be heavy, and I would always try and lift weights and do stuff, and it never worked. And then I read Tim Ferriss, and they're like, go do this. And I went and did that. And they're like, all of a sudden doing that allowed all of this other stuff to happen. It's like, what is that little thing that you can do that has effects that you can't imagine?
Let's do two things here. I mean, you just brought up, I want to talk about PTSD and psychedelics, and then I want to talk about the spiritual angle that you just brought up. So just for your audience who might not be familiar, the study you're referring to are the 2 phase 3 clinical trials that were sponsored by MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science. And they took people with treatment-resistant PTSD. That means nothing's worked. They've tried all the different medical therapies and talk therapies, and they still have PTSD. So this is a really hard bunch of people to work with. And they gave them 3 doses of MDMA with therapy before and therapy after. And it was almost 70% that emerged no longer having a PTSD diagnosis. So it's a tremendous, tremendous result. And because of that, they just filed for MDMA to be re-legalized maybe as soon as the end of this year here in America. That's incredible. And just, again, you're right, soldiers, victims of sexual assault, people who are living with PTSD. What a gift to be able to have access to these medicines. We then talk about, I'll pick another angle that there's a lot of research on, which is end of life. So some people get terminal diagnosis. So they, of course, feeling depression, feeling anxiety, feeling scared and hopeless. Lots of studies coming out on this, Johns Hopkins, UCLA, NYU, where they're giving them 1 dose of psilocybin. And they're watching depression and anxiety and end-of-life fears plummet. It doesn't change the amount of days they have left. It changes the quality of those days. And that's beautiful. And the FDA has now given psilocybin breakthrough therapy designation, and hopefully it might take another couple years before it's legalized here again, right here, period. But when you have an existential experience, to be able to access these medicines is powerful. And then we go to, what about you and me? We don't have a terminal diagnosis. We don't want to talk about depression or anxiety necessarily. Should we have the right to explore our consciousness, to explore what might be out there, to have a direct religious experience versus just being preached at from the pulpit? I believe the answer is yes. And I believe that for thousands of years, people have done this. And it's unfortunate that the governments of various cultures have forced this to be an underground practice. But when you experience these medicines in a spiritual or ceremonial setting, there's no question that this is practicing of a religion. There's no question that this is a commune with whatever is sacred to you. And it's not a recreational experience. And not that there's anything wrong with a recreational experience, but I'm talking about safe and responsible psychedelic use. And it can happen in the medical environment, and it can happen in the ceremonial environment. And it can also happen in a decriminalization environment. I think all three things can happen together and are important to be allowed to exist in this world in which we live.
So I think one of the things people are thinking is we have a heroin epidemic here. People are dying. That you look at the news and you see, hey, these people are all taking this drug. Look at what their life looks. I mean, these people look pitiful. And here we are saying, no, it's good, but I don't think you're saying heroin. And I think it would be helpful to kind of
frame this a little bit.
And explain maybe the differences or what's happening there versus how this is different from that.
Absolutely. And let's start with just reminding people that there are lots of different types of drugs. Alcohol is a drug. Tobacco is a drug. And we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people every year who die from those drugs. There was a study from Imperial College of London by Dr. David Nutt, and he said, let's forget how drugs are classified, and let's just look at the harm to self and the harm to other potential of each drug. The far left-hand side, the most dangerous drug was alcohol. It was a 72 on his chart. And you work your way down. Heroin's like a 55. Dangerous, very dangerous. But you work all the way down to the right-hand side, and mushrooms are a 6. And LSD is a 7, and MDMA is a 9. So all drugs have a danger profile with them. Of course they do. I think we have almost 200 people every year who die of acetaminophen overdoses in America. All drugs can be dangerous. But when we talk about risk, we talk about relative risk. So then we have, okay, people are dying from all of these things. We don't want anybody to unnecessarily suffer. And we have people right now who are suffering from depression and anxiety and OCD and eating disorders and all sorts of challenges where the current medical model doesn't work. Antidepressants work on maybe 40% of the people that they are given to, and they come with a huge side effect profile. So you're trading life with that medicine, and you take it every day, and you get addicted, and it becomes a decade-long thing. We have technology here that's been used for thousands of years with these psychedelic medicines. There's an opportunity for all sorts of things in the medical world, and science and medical will figure out what those things are and how they can be done. And there is a crisis of spirit. There is a crisis of loneliness. There's a crisis of inner value and inner worth. We're not getting what we need many of us aren't getting what we need from the traditional churches. And here's an opportunity in ceremonial setting to remember who you are, to remember that you are loved, you are worthy, and you are enough. And that's powerful.
It's super powerful. And I mean, let's face it. I've never gone to a therapist, but how many of us have heard stories about people, they go to therapists, they're there for 20 years and nothing changes. And I used to be involved in the pharmaceutical world. I know when you look at the trials of the drugs that you're talking about, vitamin P, as they used to refer to it.
Yeah, placebos.
The actual differences between placebo and active drug were tiny, but what was really interesting was the placebo arm had a massive positive result. And that's why the difference is it was more that they got to talk to somebody and maybe they felt heard and understood. I got to watch Patch Adams speak once. I don't know if you know. Yeah.
Sure.
And he was like, look, all people need is a hug. They need to feel loved and worthy. He goes, that's what half of them, and it's funny because if you read, and I've read articles in the Wall Street Journal, old people go to the doctor not because they're sick. It's because that's the only conversation they have and somebody looking after them. And since it's covered under Medicare, what the hell?
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that makes complete sense. I do want to stress that I don't believe actually. Here's the difference between the Western model and kind of how I look at psychedelics. I don't believe psychedelics are a cure for anything. They are purely a catalyst. And that's where I think this medicine is so different. In the Western model, oh, I have this ailment, whatever that is. Well, take this pill and it'll make the ailment go away. But we never get to the root of what causes the ailment. So then we get stuck on the pill to numb the symptoms. We then have to deal with the side effects. That leads to another set of symptoms. And off we go round and round. Psychedelics are a catalyst. They open up your mind and your heart to a different way of thinking. And with that information, we enter this period of neuroplasticity that you referenced earlier, Rocky. And with that, we can then implement, with good integration following the psychedelic experience, we can now implement behavioral change based on the insights that I got myself. Nobody told me that I should stop doing this behavior or that I can let this past experience go. I discovered it for myself. I felt it in my bones. I felt it in my heart, and I wanted to make the change. And then through the integration process, I'm able to make the change. I'm able to walk the path. But the whole philosophy on these medicines is these aren't a cure. They're a catalyst.
It's funny you mentioned that because everyone's looking for a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether it's a drug prescription. Everyone's looking for a how-to. How do I, it's always they want a prescription. And we talk about a lot of times climbing the wrong mountain. It's good. Well, what do I need to do to be happy? Well, and we started here too, right? You need to have 2 kids and get this fancy house and get this, become a doctor or whatever. And here's your prescription to go follow that path and get the college degree. And I think you're right. The young people are going, wait a minute. You all took that prescription. You followed that path. You're all miserable. We see that in, our parents. None of them are happy. They have the money. And as the conversation came, would you rather have me or the money? And it doesn't happen till too late if the question even gets asked at all. One of the topics that comes up, and I think this is also a major part of it, and I think it's a big part of what makes it a party versus actual change. They talk a lot about integration. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what integration is and what that means?
Absolutely. I want to just quickly address one point you brought up there, which is I think a lot of therapy and a lot of our Western world is I want my toys back. I want my husband back or my wife back. I want my job back. I want my money back. I want things to go back to the way they are. They're not right now. And again, psychedelics can help show you that that isn't what it is. How do you become comfortable with the reality as it really is today? How do you see the world as beautiful right now? It's not so much about transforming who you are to become something different. It's about remembering who you are already and moving forward with that knowledge.
So before you answer the integration question,
okay.
We're spending billions in racing into space. Very few people race into themselves. Yeah. It's an inward journey.
So many people, it's like, oh, I'll be happy when I live somewhere else rather than where I live now. It's the same. Nothing changes until you change the way you live. And when you change the way you live, you can live wherever it is you want to live. And where you build your community and you find your love. But changing the physical environment will just lead to another set of goalposts unless you change that perspective.
It is. Getting back to integration.
Integration. Okay. So I have another book called Beyond the Trip, and it is a journal for preparation and integration. And people say, what is this integration? Why does this matter? So post-psychedelic experience. Now, this can be a medical psychedelic experience. It can be a ceremonial psychedelic experience. It can be a recreational psychedelic experience. It doesn't matter. The idea is, though, you've now created a state of neuroplasticity in your brain. How do you take advantage of it? And one of the ways to do is to work with, it can be a coach, it can be a therapist, it can be on your own using prompts like in my journal, but it's to ask yourself questions. What did I see in my experience? What did I think in my experience? What did I feel in my experience? How do I want to reshape my life now that this other thing is possible? and slowly working on those things to actualize the things that were coming alive for you during your psychedelic experience. So in my journal, we have exercises over a course of 4 weeks. There's a gratitude journal that goes over 30 days. And then in most of the ceremonies that I work with, we insist on kind of 4 weeks of integration phone calls and then a community of some sort of people that you can talk about this. And when I say talk about this, I don't necessarily mean psychedelics. I mean love, happiness, mental health. What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have a community? What does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to be a brother? What does it mean to be a husband? So people that you can talk to about these real matters and rise above kind of the trivial small talk that many of us do as the norm. How are you? I'm okay. How are you? Are you really okay? What's going on? How do you feel today? Let's pause for a moment.
Everyone's lying, right? On either side of that, right? Nobody's going to say they're depressed, and everyone's pretending like they're successful. So it doesn't matter where on the spectrum. Everyone's wearing a mask and playing a game depending on what they're looking to demand of the world, give to them, right? Give me respect, give me pity, give me whatever it is that you're looking for. You mentioned
But that
coaches.
awareness, Rocky, is important. So let's talk about that just for a second. So we're talking about how
Okay.
we position, how we all position. Sure. And part of this process is, again, being in a mindfulness practice is a great way to do this, to recognize I am not my thoughts. I am not my career. I am not even my name. So when I am positioning myself as something, at least be aware that I've done this, that there at some level, I am not being fully authentic. And no bad anybody, just that's the game. Okay, I saw that. I noticed that. I really want to go deeper with Rocky. How do I slow this conversation down so that I can be more authentic? And then we can go that way for a while. There's a time and a place, but the awareness, spending time being aware of the things that aren't serving you is the practice, so that we can optimize this life in which we live.
I say most people are asleep. They're in the drift. Until they wake up, none of that kind of changes. My question was going back to a comment you made. Can you explain the difference between coaching and therapy?
Licensure. um, I there are certain people who want a medical model. They want to have a diagnosis. They want to be given talked to by somebody with letters after their name. They want the framework that a therapy experience provides. There are other people who know that they need assistance, but they don't want to. They want something different. They don't want that medical model. And just like there's a range of quality of therapists out there, and C's get degrees, and let's not forget that, yeah, not all therapists are created equal. There's a range of coaches out there. And I think, I mean, for me, coaching has been one of my secret tools. I've had 2 coaches for more than a decade that have been tremendously helpful. And again, helping me actualize different things. And the coaches, I guess the coaches that I've used have shifted over the years. It went from when I was younger to coaches that could help me scale a business faster, help me could see blind spots, help remind me that whatever situation in the business that I was dealing with is not so bad. They've done it before. They've seen it. They've had banks foreclose and gone through transactions and mergers that have gone bad. Okay, great. And now the coaches that I go to are just constantly reminding me, what's the path you're on? What is the practice? Are you doing this for yourself first? Is that a little bit of ego that's creeping in there? And it's just a different type of coach. For me, that's works. But I think I'll speak for myself. I greatly appreciate the value that allowing someone to have an ongoing relationship who has no financial interest in my success and it only cares about me as a person has been a tremendous resource to have. Someone that if I was to say to an outside person, it might sound either braggy or too complaining. It's lovely to have that type of person in my life.
It's hard to get honest feedback.
It's really hard. Many people have an agenda. And yeah, coaching, again, especially coaches that are not financially tied to you. Beautiful. And again, and also it's also part of the practice. Can you take the honest feedback? And are you willing as a human to say, bring it on? I'm not going to be offended. Tell me what you're seeing. I'm seeing you behaving in a way that might not be in alignment with what you say you are. I'm seeing you behaving in a way that might not achieve the goals that you just stated. Now, do you want to change the goals or do you want to change the behavior? That's up to you. It doesn't bother me either way. This is just what I'm noticing.
I find most people don't like the sharpening. It creates heat. And if you want to be sharpened, you've got to go through the process of the sparks and take the heat and do the work. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it's harsh. And you just got to decide whether you want to live in the misery or, well, and
I don't know if it's harsh. Yeah, it can
harsh. Harsh means
hard to hear.
Hard to hear, yes.
Yeah. It's not harsh. If you're speaking from a place of love and you're speaking from a place of mutual respect, and you're speaking not as I know more than, but we're peers. I've seen some of the things you've done, and this is just things I'm observing. I can't tell you how to feel, but I can tell you that these behaviors can lead to challenges in your life.
I guess I use the word harsh going back to what we talked about with the young generation. Mm-hmm. When I grew up, you did something wrong, the neighbor yelled at you, the other neighbor yelled at you, your parent yelled at you. Today, everyone kind of tiptoes around you. So it's not that it's harsh, it's just the way we kind of talk about that. One of the things I have learned and noticed is it seems the cutting edge of wanting to do things differently in this space is actually coming out of Silicon Valley. It seems to be much more prevalent there to try these types of things, do things differently. I think you even mentioned Steve Jobs in your book.
I do, and Tim Ferriss, and a lot of the funding that's gone to these institutions have come out of Silicon Valley. There was a study done in the late 60s where they took Silicon Valley executives who were each studying a problem. They couldn't solve it for months, and they gave them a dose of, I think it was LSD in that study. And something like 2/3 of them went ahead and solved whatever problem that was bothering them afterwards. Yeah, and microdosing is pretty popular. And I think that's amazing. But we also have 309, I believe, academic institutions that are studying psychedelics right now. And we have this beautiful merging of traditions from India to South America to Central America, merging with psychedelics at the Psychedelic Science Conference this summer. Almost 13,000 attendees with, I think the cheapest ticket was $1,000. They had a whole spiritual track: psychedelics in Islam, psychedelics in Judaism, psychedelics in Hinduism, psychedelics in Buddhism. And they were packed. And it was amazing to see that this is, we had people from the Unitarian Seminary talking about, well, we're going to start a psychedelic teaching program. Amazing. Go team, go. There's a lot happening in this space. So yes, there's from technology leaders to spiritual leaders, and everything in between are working to bring these medicines out to people and meet the people where they are. And that can range based on, for the same reason we talked about before. Some people like therapists, some people like coaching, some people like chocolate, some people like vanilla. That's okay. These medicines can help.
Is there anything that we should have talked about that we didn't get a chance to?
Oh, Rocky, I think you and I could probably talk for hours about a whole bunch of things. But no, I think, I guess I would say, if you're still listening to this podcast, so something's calling you as you're listening to this. And there are 3 ways that people traditionally find their way to psychedelics. So some of you listening will choose to go to the medical model. You might go in clinic with a ketamine provider. You could do an at-home model with like a Mind Bloom or a Better You Care. Some of you listening might say, I wanted to support decrim nature. No adult should tell another adult what nature they should put in their body. Okay, great. And maybe you're doing that because you can't afford the medical model and you need access. Great. And maybe you're doing it because you want to have a recreational experience. That's not my place to judge. And some of you listening might say, I want to do more of the ceremonial model that Rocky's talking about. Okay, great. And there are over somewhere between 200 and 2,000 psychedelic churches right now in America, in that zone. There are ceremonial experiences in multiple countries, in Costa Rica, in Peru, in Mexico, in Jamaica, in the Netherlands. So you have options there as well. And if you're looking for that type of experience, I strongly suggest go find your local psychedelic society, start talking to people in your community, or come on to schedule a call with me and we can talk about it. But there's options out there. And if antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications are not working for you, it's not you failing the medicine, it's the medicine failing you, and that's okay. No bad you. There are other options.
There's always a way.
There's
You
always
just
a way.
have to find it. And I think a lot of times it's just not even knowing what is possible, being stuck inside a box and not seeing it, or having a mindset that's preventing you from seeing it. Because it's funny, the moment that it's FDA approved, all of a sudden everyone will be running, oh, now it's okay.
Yep, and that's beautiful. But we shouldn't, as we do this medical model, I'm encouraging people to remember that the underground ceremonial model never stopped. So we might have been in a prohibition here in our country for the last 50 years, but there were always psychedelic ceremonies happening. We might have been trying to squash psychedelics for the last 400 years in Europe and in America. And these spiritual experiences continued. So if we were to take it only in the medical model and leave behind the spiritual, that's stealing. And that doesn't seem okay to me. And I actually just came back from a ceremony in Mexico, and we were sitting at one point in a cave and doing this sound healing meditation thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, it is crazy to me that so many Americans have to travel out of the country to experience to explore their consciousness, and we'd rather say no, that's not okay here in America, and have unhappy people and lonely people and people with treatment resistant whatever, than allow them to use these tools.
Little by little, we'll bring about change.
And it's conversations like this, Rocky. I appreciate you doing this. I mean, that's like you're a fractional CFO and a coach, and you're choosing to make this a topic for your people. It's beautiful. I appreciate that so much.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
It's the perspective, Rocky. It's believing in my core that this world is a supportive, loving world, and there's plenty for everyone, and that it has always taken care of me and will always take care of me. My job is to stay alive and just and notice what's already out there.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That I had it in me the whole time, that I was chasing. I was trying to worried about earning my mom's love, or having my father love me in a way that he wasn't capable of, instead of just being loved as I am, and then being able to love them for who they were. It took me a long time to get there.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
All right, I'm gonna tie it into what you do, Rocky. I'm gonna say, pay attention to what it lights up your body, and follow that. People can make a living doing anything they want to do, and then be very careful of the attachments that you make. All of them, whether it's what you rent or what you buy, what you, where you live, because those attachments are part of what gets people stuck. Just be aware. If you choose to live outside of a city, as an example, and you need to have a car, and you need to have insurance, you need to have this. If you move someplace for a job and you assume some debt, there's things that come with that. And now you're working to work. So let's try not to work, and let's try to work as part of living.
If people would like to learn more about you, the book, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, so if people are interested in me as a speaker for their events, mattzemon.com is the best way. There's a whole speaking reel and speaking form. I have my 2 books. Psychedelics for Everyone is available everywhere books are sold and also on Audible. That seems to be the most popular, which is wild to me. I didn't know that. And then my journal, Beyond the Trip, is also on Amazon. And then I have a free guide to microdosing. If that's something people are interested in, they can just go to my website and download it. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and love when people reach out on scheduled calls to talk about um, kind of how their journeys on this process. Happy to help any way I can is my message.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for checking out this unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can find the full episode along with all the back episodes at richersoul.com. This podcast is brought to you by Profit Comes First, where we help business owners to have a more profitable and growing business so they can live the life of their dreams. Check that out as well wherever you listen to all this content.